Welcome, everybody. This is Charlie, and this is the podcast To Hell and Back. Title sort of speaks for itself. I just parenthetically say I visited Marsha Linehan this past weekend in Seattle, and to see how she was doing, and she's had some health struggles, and at the same time the supportive community around her is just totally heartwarming. The level of compassion that she has managed to generate in people around her, it just speaks to how social support gets going around somebody and how sustaining it is, and how meaningful it is. So it was very lovely to see her, and now to get back to work and see all of you. So you probably know, if you're listening to this podcast, that this is actually a fourth part of a four-part, what up to now is a 4 parts. You never know how many parts there'll be. But 4 parts about talking about living with cancer, talking with Seth Axelrod for the last 3 podcasts about his own experiences, sometimes in brutal detail, about what it's been like and what he's coped with, and also with how he has coped with it and what the challenges have been. And I just want to summarize one thing, and then I want us to jump into today, because today has a very special additional element to it. I want to say that I've been thinking and listening to Seth and talking with Seth these last 3 hours. I think this is relevant to people coping with adversity. I hadn't thought of it this way before, but it's kind of like, at this moment, I would say people enter episodes of adversity with angels, and they enter them with skills. And sometimes there's an overlap. But the angels are things like what you bring to the situation that isn't necessarily a skill, even if it's the product of some previously used skills. So a social support system, we've talked a fair amount about that. A sense of humor, a temperament that allows you to recover in the moment, or fairly quickly, after blow after blow after blow, and reposition yourself in the present moment. I think there's a temperamental feature that some people have, and more of than others, and I think it's just a lucky break. I think and I think Seth brings a lot of that to the table, and not that there aren't skills in that, but there's a kind of a temperamental balance that helps. I think intellectual curiosity helps. I think having interest in what you're going through and able to conceptualize it, I think, has been helpful. And then there's family resources and social support resources, as I said. And as we'll get to, and the main focus of today, after we spend a little time catching up with something we finished on last time, is having, in Seth's case, having a wife that's been on this journey with him from the first minute of it and before that, and how they have coped with it and how she has coped with it. So we're going to hear from her in this podcast. And so I want to welcome both Seth and Rebecca, who, if you're on the Zoom cast, you can probably see both of them. If you're just listening, you can hear them in just a minute. But welcome, Rebecca, because you haven't been on up until now. I really appreciate it. And then there's all these skills that we've talked about that have been interspersed through all of this, as I think it should be. And I think a heavy emphasis on accepting reality, a radical acceptance of reality, a heavy emphasis on awareness of reality, with skills like observing and describing and trying to avoid getting into too many judgments that pull you off center, and trying to stick with one thing in the present moment at a time, and trying to use all of that to cultivate making wise mind choices as opposed to not very wise mind choices. And I think all of that is DBT skills. And then there's other skills we haven't gotten into quite as much. But one we're heading into now, I think, will be one called willingness. If you're not sure what that is, you're about to learn. Because where we left off last time, when Seth and I were talking, was getting into the topic of what to do about bitterness, about how possible it is when you have something like cancer or some other inescapable adversity that you have to contend with, of how easy it is and how natural it is to fall into feelings of bitterness and sometimes not be able to get out of them so easily. And so I had asked him at the very end of last time, if at the beginning of this time, and before we kind of jumped into what things have been like for Rebecca, if he said a little more about his experiences of possible bitterness or how he has coped with that, and the skills that he's used for that. So Seth, I want to introduce you again. I'm just so happy that you're back again, and appreciate a lot to be getting to know you.
Thank you, Charlie. I want to again say I'm really grateful to be on the podcast, to get to be speaking with you, to get to be sharing about something I'm going through in a way that hopefully adds more meaning to it. Hopefully does offer things to people that are going through, whether it's cancer or other kinds of adversity, that there may be things from this. And I really appreciate some of the messages that have come in of people saying that they are getting things from this, that they are this example, the way I've approached some things has been helpful, applying skills or new iterations, new ways of approaching them. And I also want to acknowledge that for me, this is kind of, willingness is diving into the pool. It's kind of jumping into some unknown without a certainty of how it goes. It's trying things and doing things consistent with values, which I want to touch on just a little bit. But that to me, I don't know exactly what happens with these podcasts. I don't know exactly who sees them and what ripples occur. And while I've been open, this is being much more open in a way that I haven't been before. And then this evening, I'm doing it again because I've invited my wife in, which as a psychologist, for the most part, I leave I may share a story here or there, but my family isn't present with me when I'm doing my professional work. Mm-hmm. And this is a cross between my personal life and doing things consistent with things that are meaningful to me. Mm. And like with you doing this podcast, to be trying to help people who suffer and that connection. So it's again, me jumping out into the world in another way by bringing my partner with me, my wife, to this. So I'm very aware of that, and I'm very curious about kind of how that goes and where that goes. So thanks for that opportunity. Thanks for suggesting it.
I'll just tell you, Seth, you're not going to get any very quick outcome to the question of how that goes out there into the universe. It's going to be like everything else you've been coping with for 6 years. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty about this for a while.
Oh yeah. No, I'm the way my mind works. I know that in the next days I'm going to hear something, and I know that months from now or years from now, someone's going to say, right, I just saw this podcast and I had this, or
that's right.
Right. So the bitterness thing, I think some of that good luck. I haven't struggled with lots of bitterness. When I think about my experience of coping with cancer, of dealing with this, it doesn't center around bitterness. And I think, there's people who look at resiliency and try to figure out what's the difference between the people who are destroyed by adversity and people who aren't, and maybe even develop in some way. It hasn't been central, and yet there certainly has been bitterness that's shown up. There's been things that have occurred. I think for the big picture on the cancer, the fact that this is a natural trauma, I think helps me. The fact that there aren't obvious things that draw me into blaming, someone did this to me, or I did this to me, or something like that. And I think if it was, I suspect I'd have to work harder on the radical acceptance and the non-judgmental to let go of that. If I think about parts of the story where there was some kind of human created challenge, if it was an insurance delay or denial that I had to fight and get access to the kind of one of the radiation treatments, at the time there was definitely a direction of fighting that would bring up anger, And if I think of another time where I got what I think was poor medical advice from someone who presented it as if it was good medical advice, and even when presented with, here's a different option I'm being told about, here's what you're telling me, am I getting this right? And the person said yes, and still expecting me to take that option.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I said, well, I'm going to go with the other option, the response, and I have an email that's still in my email somewhere, was, I'm so glad that you had two excellent choices. And
Right.
and if I talk about this, you know, I do reconnect with that little, you know, there must be you know, there is a little resentment, there is, you know, some kind of grudge in there, but I don't spend time with that. You know, I let it go. And if it was eating at me, I would be working harder at letting that go. You know, it's such a small piece of things, and it's almost a comical story at this point. But it isn't a lot of bitterness. You know, so one, I think the fact that I don't attribute it to anything but the universe worked this way, and that I naturally release that. I come to a place of, you know, I'm at mercy of the luck that caused this, and this can happen. And it's the why not me. It's why me, why not me.
You know, and you're acknowledging you're at the mercy of more difficult to accept is human error or human bad decisions. You know,
well,
right?
Well, that one would be harder. The fact that so much of my story, I think the fact that it's natural causes.
Yeah.
You know, that's a natural. That's
no,
a
I get it.
Of, you know, I can't be angry, or I don't feel angry at mutations happen, and my immune system didn't kick it off before it turned into you know, a growth or whatever.
Right.
That this thing is there, and it's my lot. You know, it's the cards I was dealt, and I, you know, that willingness to the acceptance of the cards I have, and the willingness to play them. So I think coming back to those skills, I think that also emotion regulation, thinking about things related to noticing the emotions that come up and being able to take a step back. And if I am going down a road that might be leading me toward a bitterness, I think I stop myself, and I use my skills. I go back to, you know, practicing more willingness. If that means doing more mindfulness, if that means whatever that is, to not get consumed. I think there is a monitoring that I do and noticing reactions. And so there's that, you know, I think there's those skills. One thing that really struck me, you know, one question that you've put to me and others have put to me about the openness, about remarking on this, being so open in my coping, and I have been for years. From the initial diagnosis, I shared it with my colleagues and my Facebook and my patients. And what I'm struck with is that the coping that I do is very values consistent. You know, and even if it's DBT skills that I'm using, that I monitor and I notice, am I doing things in a way that I approve of, you know, that I can look at and say, that's the way I'd, you know, I want to see myself coping. I want to see other people see me, that this is the person I want to be. And I think a lot of these DBT skills get my seal of approval, you know, and right now, you know, doing this, I think the FAST skills, that this is interpersonal behavior, and I'm sticking to values, and that's true with being open here. That's also true just internally, practicing willingness and saying, okay, what's going to be effective here? Putting myself, you know, if a surgery, you know, there was one surgery, not my first one, but my second one, that I was surprised the morning of the surgery by how terrified I felt going to the surgery, because I hadn't been terrified the day before. The morning of, it hit. And I remember going to the surgery room, and and communicating with the doctors, there, and being terrified and choosing to, this is what I'm participating in. This is what's needed. I can't imagine not, to the best of my ability, responding in ways that to me seem like the thing to do, even if my emotions are wanting to pull me another direction. If I think of that example, the last thing that I think for me, I is a speculation on why it's not, why doesn't bitterness stick? And it's really it brings us to tonight, which is that I have a life partner, that I have someone that's been with me through all these hurdles, and I've never had to go through any part of this without having this secure base to draw from. And if I didn't have that, I don't know if I could have coped this well. I don't know, because I had it.
Right.
And that when there were big emotions, if there was points where I did have to let go of some work thing, and it was devastating for me, my wife Rebecca was there, and supportive and accepting, and I always had that experience of going through this with someone, and I think I got tremendous strength for that. I think that's a likely very significant part of not feeling this bitter. And the thing that I shared with you that it brings me to is I make the comparison of people that suffer, that you and I and some others listening, we make our professional lives trying to reach out and help people who go through adversity, and often don't have those kinds of life partners, people that they're going through, the challenges with. Either they don't have the relationships that they wish they had, or they don't know are possible, or they have relationships, but in the relationships they don't get the love and acceptance in ways that they find supportive when they're going through their worst times.
Right. So true.
Yeah, and so that sticks out to me, and that and you and I also spoken about how in our work we try to instill the hope that these things are possible, and I think that they are crucial elements. And that's not exactly DBT like you say, but it's such a significant piece. If someone wants to have that kind of relationship and they don't have it, where they're going through things and they haven't built that kind of relationship. I had that. I've always had that. I wanted to share one more thing. I know we're going to shift, and we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to hear from Rebecca and hear some of this past experience. But I wanted to hit one more, which also relates to the bitterness, which is the humor, and that all the way through, in the hospitalizations, going into the hospital, there's always been things that we and our family and people around me, the doctors, the nurses, there's been humor to bring to it. One that hit kind of early on, that's been kind of a running joke with us. It involves Rebecca, and it's when I realized that if I'm ever hit by a bus, okay, then at the funeral, the story for Rebecca to share with people is I beat cancer.
Yes, right. I like that. I like that.
And with that, I want to turn things over to what you'd like to ask my wife.
I didn't know that was coming. That's very funny. Yes, that's right. You beat cancer. Yes. Yes, the Iron Man, Captain Proton, and all of your power, you beat cancer by getting hit by a bus. Yes. Oh
If
my
I could
God.
be so lucky.
Oh my God. Humor is so important. When my wife and I went a lot of years in our relationship before we decided we would go ahead and have children, and then for various reasons we needed to, and then felt good about adopting two boys. And when we did, our deepest worry was that they wouldn't think we were funny. like that we, because we liked our sense of humor, and we were kind of irreverent and dark in our sense of humor. We thought, what if we have these like straight children who like don't think we're funny? This is going to be terrible. I mean, so actually it's, and thank God they both are just hysterical, and one of them's like the most irreverent person I know, and so thank God. But sense of humor is an underestimated thing, and not easy to just cultivate, but it's good to use, and to not feel bad about using it, even if you're in the middle of adversity. I think it's really important. Yeah. So Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you.
So good to meet you in person. I'll just have to tell people during these podcasts, Rebecca has been watching the ones with Seth, and I only know that because her name is on the little Zoomcast, little snapshots above at the top of the screen. It always says R. Axelrod. And then I asked Seth, oh, Rebecca's watching. So it's really good to see you. I appreciate you coming on. And God knows what motivates you to go ahead and put yourself out there like this. But I actually kind of know from having had some chance to talk to the two of you. So I'm not now surprised at all. You are totally in this.
Absolutely.
You're just in this. This has been your journey too.
We are a team. When I was thinking about looking back over this process and what would be most important to me to share, and I was thinking about that initial diagnosis and Seth's surgery and the recuperation from it, I look back on that time with a fondness, which seems kind of odd, but it's because we had this period of time when the world stopped, and it was him and me against the world, and it was so validating of our relationship, and our bringing our strengths together to solve the problems and do what needed to be done, and we got this. And that's been the entire process for us.
And it included about 3 to 4 weeks of Rebecca being with me almost continuously through the different hospitalizations, like where work was put on hold, our kids were put on with family. It was kind of this odd extended honeymoon, enjoying our time together. I was in a lot of pain, but
my husband was learning to walk again. But a honeymoon nonetheless.
Aside from that, it was a lot of really nice time together.
Yeah. I get it. I can imagine it. I've had many versions of that, but I know just what you mean. It was the two of you were totally ensconced in that reality, and the rest of the world was further away, and you were going through it together, which is a lot more comforting than going through it alone, and it brings more resources to the table than going through it alone. So. Wow. And Rebecca, this thing that you also indicated to me in advance of this conversation, that this was one stage of things for you, was this sort of the period of getting this diagnosis and the surgery and this whole thing where you were in a bubble. But then you also indicated to me that then, you hit a different stage after that. And I wonder if you could tell us about that.
When Seth's first metastasis showed up, the world changed dramatically, because up to that point, the odds were pretty good. Most people with this diagnosis, once it's removed and it never comes back, and it's a matter of living with the results of that surgery, which can be pretty dramatic. But most people, it's low grade, it's done. And so I knew that there was still risk, but it didn't seem likely. And when that first metastasis came,
And then at the surgery, we learned it was high grade. So then the risk increased, but it still wasn't present. It was just a risk.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
It still could be that I was done. And it was still 60, 70% chance that I was done still.
yeah, yeah.
But 30, 40% chance that something was going to come back.
And with this particular cancer, a very high success rate at, completely removing the cancer initially, but once it metastasizes, they don't have a way of handling that. It doesn't respond to chemo. It doesn't respond to radiation. Once it metastasizes, the odds are bad.
Wow.
And they're not bad immediately. It's not, you've got 6 months, but it's a long, slow, steady progression.
No, I thought that Seth when he explained that in one of the previous podcasts, that I'd never thought of it being able to be this way before, that it can be very aggressive, but slow.
Right.
But it's aggressive because, as he put it, it likes to go other places in the body. And
Right.
It's determined, you might say. I mean, if you personalize the cancer.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So once you got one metastasis, it changed the world for you.
And that was the first time that it had ever occurred to me that I might ever outlive my husband.
Wow.
One of our long-term jokes is our wedding contract states that I get to go first. And this was rewriting the rules. It really had just never occurred to me that could be a possible future.
Yeah. Yeah.
Looking back on it now, I know that period of time, I had a luxury in that I had time to grapple with this. And I went through this intense soul-searching process and this real identity crisis while we weren't in crisis. Seth had that second surgery to remove the first metastasis. Life was going on. I didn't have to do anything different. And I had time to really dig into, what does this mean? And I think that most people dealing with this kind of a crisis are also trying to figure out how to function with a vastly different life. And I had the luxury of things being pretty stable. But I sat down and looked at where I was now and what my life could be pretty soon. Because our kids were in high school at that point. So I was looking at them being out of the nest within the next 5 years. And if they're away from home and I don't have my husband, then who am I? And I had never even considered myself outside of being a wife and mother.
Yeah, it's really, you put it so graphically. It's really, I can get it in a way I'm not sure I would have otherwise, is that you really developed an identity within a certain set of conditions that you imagined would always be there. And
Yeah.
there would be a husband and who you loved and who you knew from your early 20s, and then you would have children. And that would be it. And you would do your other things. And I'm aware that you have some musical talents and other things you've pursued, but still the pillars of your existence, the things you could count on, all of a sudden one of them was like, oh, now what?
What's occurring to me is it's a little bit like a divorce. I mean, a man or a woman who goes through a divorce, but some people may have a prenup. Some people may go into a marriage with a prenup. There's some kind of plan, but we had no prenup.
Your prenup was that I'll die first.
That was her prenup.
That's the prenup. I'm afraid that's any good prenup lawyer would have advised you not to sign on to that as your prenup. I mean, that's not a good idea. You can't. But oh my God, what a change. Now you're thinking, oh, it's possible I'll be without him. Who will I be? and my children will be out of the nest.
Right.
And I'll still relate to them, but oh my God, your dual role of wife and mother is gone. So could I ask you, Rebecca, this might not be possible for you to answer because it might just be something that sort of took place in a way that's hard to articulate, but how did you search your soul? When you said, oh, I did soul searching and I sat and I had time to realize this, but I wonder, did you think of scenarios? Did you just let your mind speculate of, oh my God, what am I going to do if Seth isn't here? I mean, how did you do that?
My favorite way of making big decisions, I refer to it as trying them on for size. So I make a decision and see how I feel about that, and then change my mind. And I wasn't latching on to decisions like I will do with things somewhat less important, but I definitely did a lot of brainstorming. There are no strings attached. There are no rules. I could go anywhere in the world. I could, decide that the most important thing to me is to be out in the woods in a cabin. I don't know rules. And so I did a lot of imagining. What would I feel like living alone in a cabin in the woods? What would I feel like in a metropolitan area? And what was important to me to do with myself?
What was important to you is that was also a theme, was that as you started asking in light of what was going on, part of it was this question, what's really important to me? And when you honed in on that question, you started to get some answers. You started to look and say, you know what, this is something that I feel passionately about. This is something, and your approach to kind of where you were going changed. And just one thing I want to say, one theme that I talked about before, this kind of dual existence, this kind of like living and being aware of, for me, like, what do I do with myself? And I have these two different directions in mind, that this is very much the same as Rebecca, because it's, okay, so we're together, we have this life, but then there's also here's this other possibility, and that you've really been doing both, because you've been living in a way that makes the other possibility work while we're together. It's kind of living in two places at the same time. And it has been a shift on, you and the relationship, because it's with the reality acceptance of, not that I am going to disappear at this particular time, but it's a reality that, yes, like, we don't know exactly how this goes. And, and I'm fortunate to be doing as well as I am right now. And opening up to, so how does that work? And Rebecca's really been able to balance kind of I feel like just as much as me, how does it go this way and how does it go that way?
But before I got to the place that we now know as a lovely balance, part of that process was, it doesn't have to balance. What if the thing that brings me meaning and fulfillment is being a Sherpa in the Himalayas? If all bets were off, what I was allowing myself to examine all the possibilities. And part of I keep coming back with geographical references, but that was useful for me to help kind of sort out, well, what would I be doing with myself? Why would I be there?
Right.
And which helped me shape the why. Why get out of bed every morning? Why continue with living? What is living about? And when I realized that my purpose is centered in the world of education, that, and I can spend an entire hour talking about the things I'm passionate about, but it's easiest to say, in the world of education, then it was this relief that that was something I could go ahead and be investing in without it being a conflict with the things that I also was invested in doing now.
And so, it didn't have to wait. Once once this shifted inside you, you thought, I can do this now, or I can get on this path now. And so you've been pursuing education.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it has had this added benefit, this icing on the cake, is that because I can go ahead and pursue it now, there's that much less concern about the financial issues. The Seth has always been the major breadwinner, and because I now have this path for myself, that also comes with increasing my own income. Then as Seth has needed to step back in how much he's working, it happens to be that that's been less of an issue, but that's really kind of a happy coincidence.
Let me ask you, Rebecca, in going through this soul-searching process, and sort of, you really remind me of how we understand identity development, even in teenagers, that they try on different things, different clothes, different personas, different identities, different friendship groups, different everything, until there's sort of some shaking out that goes on. And just sort of like you were thrust into a situation where actually this was a process to go through. And but how much of this, given the nature of the situation with Seth and his life being at stake, how much of this would you share with him in the process of going through this? Were you openly discussing, gosh, Seth, if you're gone, here's what I might do? Or was this kind of like, nah, that's a little sensitive?
It was, go ahead. I want to say fairly open, but go ahead.
I mean, in general, we're pretty comfortable with talking as it's going, from what's there. I will say that the part of this process when I was confronting things like, if I am widowed, will there be another partner? That was stuff that I wasn't really quick to come talk to you about.
Fair enough.
But so, and partly because that felt weird. That felt extramarital in a strange way.
Yeah.
I think there's a part of the grieving process that I think is helpful to do, and a part of the grieving process that I don't know is super helpful to do. It's in terms of the career stuff, you were open about this, and it was this, kind of, I think, sorting out yourself as much as, between the two of us, how much of this has to be how concrete and how planned, right? Because again, this duality of I'm still here, and yet there's this potential direction. And I think that Rebecca's ability to sort out what her life could be, this is what you said, that by sorting out what your life could be, you could be present. Right. And by being like unable to, it was harder to be.
Right.
I would say for the vast majority of it, as far as I'm aware, it's been open conversation.
Yeah. And when I say it was kind of a relief, the authenticity of who I see myself becoming in the future is built on who I am now. And having found a potential future that I feel good about, let me let go of it and stop worrying about it. I'll be fine. If I lose him, it will be awful. And like millions of people before me, I will survive it. And I will continue to have a life with meaning. Now that I know that, I don't have to put all my time and energy into that. That's settled. And now I can come back to the meaningful life that we're in the process of living today.
Yeah.
And it really was important for me to struggle with potential futures in order to be present now.
It's so amazing. I mean, it makes me think, you know, that every couple, but without having to go through cancer, should go through this process. I mean, it's sort of like a process where you start to say, I guess it'd be just called differentiation, but a process of saying, okay, what platform am I standing on in my life, and what is my identity? What are my own values, and what's driving my stuff? Yes, I'm a mother. Yes, I'm a wife. Yes, I'm a member of this community, but is there anything else I want to be, want to do? And so it sort of has forced you into it. And also, in a strange way, the fact that it's been a slow process with a remaining uncertain outcome has given you time to still be with your beloved partner and your family and go through this. Which is not what, I mean, usually and I've known personally situations like this where this person is lost quickly. And then it's like, holy cow, what do I do now? I mean, and then there's a long grief period. And then there's a chance to maybe a year later, someone's thinking, you know what? Maybe I should do this thing I used to think I would do when I was a teenager. And now I'm going to do it. You know, it's sort of, I mean, yeah, so this has been amazing, sort of weird benefit to what you've been through.
There was an urgency to it at the time, because once I accepted that this is the path we were on, I didn't have any kind of timeline for how long did we have, and we still don't have a timeline.
No.
But and the longer this lasts, the less urgent. Does that make sense? At the time, this could have happened in a few months, and it needed to be sorted out, which is also part of the equilibrium I have at this point. That you know, I thought several years ago that he was in imminent danger, you know, and you know, and we've had some pretty wonderful years in that time.
I'm remembering being at a retreat once with Thich Nhat Hanh, and there was a time he would allow questions. And this person who was in a marriage was at the retreat. It was a man. The wife wasn't there, and he was saying how much trouble they were having. And Thich Nhat Hanh asked him to close his eyes and then imagine what kind of relationship they would have in 100 years. And the guy and everybody else, 1,100 of us in this intimate retreat, you know, thought, oh, right. I'm not always going to be there with this person. And so actually you have thought experiments that if you engage in them seriously, reframe, you're forced into a thought experiment in a way, not that you would have had to go there, and you're unbelievably enterprising in how you've done this and come out where you've come out. I'm amazing. I want to ask you something else before we get further, and we can still go into any of this that we want. But you know, you brought something else up in sort of a pre-podcast email. And I was just so interested in this because I think it's so human and so true in these situations, you know, of how do you handle it when your spouse has cancer and other people are asking you about it, like, you know, and in themselves trying to figure out how to relate to it, how to relate to you, how to relate to Seth and everything, like. And you said that had been challenging sometimes. I wondered if you could say a little about it. It's kind of a tender aspect of all of this.
It's a part of this that I definitely still struggle with, because we are blessed to be surrounded by people who care and want to be supportive. And so the challenge is when someone says, "How's your husband doing?" If I give them a pretty accurate answer, the tumors are progressing, the most recent trial has ended because it wasn't successful, they're heartbroken. And I didn't realize it was this bad. And I find myself having to help them process in this social conversation the kind of heavy feelings that we've been processing for years now. And this is not small talk. This is, "Hey, I'm glad to see you. How you been?" That's not the answer people want.
Yeah, right.
Right. On the other hand, "How's your husband doing?" "Oh, he's fine. Thanks for asking." "Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. That's really wonderful." And it's not. And then I feel like I've lied. I've given them this false sense that everything's wonderful. Or I'm frustrated that that people are believing that somehow it could be magically better, and that's not likely to happen. I'm still absolutely willing for a miracle, but it's not likely. And the person asking hasn't done anything wrong, and I can't come out of this conversation in a way that I feel good about.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what you could say to such a person about the challenge it poses for you. You're kind of in it's a no easy situation. There's no easy answer to this, to resolve it. I mean, it just is what it is. I mean, it is.
In the last few days, I tried different things out. In the last few days, I've said to a few people, all things considered, I'm doing remarkably well.
Yeah, well, that's a dialectical answer.
Yeah, that seems to have been hit pretty well, because people seem to hear that and say, okay, I get like I'm having the Gilbert and Sullivan, modified rapture. I'm getting like a supportive kind of, oh, okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. It's kind of communicating something. It's a tricky one. The people who are closest to us are able to stay closer to what's going on. The people who are on Facebook actually do better, because they tend to know more of like what things are happening.
Yeah, right.
If they read the paragraph, well, they know there's ups and downs, and that's right. But the opportunities for invalidation, I think that Rebecca is talking about, that making, trying to take care of her in a way that doesn't match, or trying to show optimism in a way that doesn't match. It's
very hard, because the things you're talking about are situations in which people have positive intentions, and you can feel their positive intention. They're trying to ask in what they think is a sensitive way, but they're out of sync with your situation, and they're asking. It's sort of like, reminds me of once I was going in for a medical procedure, and Seth, maybe you've gone through this, I think, and I'm in a hallway, and I'm supposed to climb onto a stretcher, and I remember a nurse saying to me, "Dr. Swenson," which was like, so it's odd already. "Dr. Swenson, do you think you could climb up and lie down on the stretcher?" And I wanted to say, "No, I'm incapable of climbing on a stretcher. I don't know how to lie down." And it was totally inappropriate. I would never have said that, but I thought, and it was a perfectly good question. But people, I've wanted to write a book recently about therapists. Some book that would be next to a drugstore counter, one of these little books like horoscope books, that says stupid things therapists say.
Oh yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, but also it would be stupid things that healthcare professionals say, but that they don't know they're stupid. They don't mean to be stupid. They're even well-intended, but it's also stupid things friends say when they're inquiring about your life-threatening condition. I mean, you guys could write a book on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet you
Yeah.
wouldn't want to do that because
I mean-
actually you appreciate that these people want to be supported.
Right.
And
And I don't think the responsibility for how to ask a question that gets the answer they're looking for is on them. You know, they have done the appropriate thing by expressing, I'm concerned about how he is.
That's right.
And
That's right.
I really feel like the struggle is mine to how to answer this question in a way that acknowledges what they're trying to say
Right.
and doesn't make either one of us more uncomfortable. And I just haven't figured out what that is yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
on the other hand, when there are heavier things that happen, you know, if there's a new medical consultation and Rebecca wants to take the day off to go with me, you know, to it, you know, when there's like an obvious kind of thing,
People are wonderful.
people are wonderful. People
Absolutely
are wonderful.
wonderful.
It's really the
People are
marathon.
wonderful.
I mean, it's the marathon aspect of it and how to respond to the marathon. I think that's the more challenging thing. You know,
That's a good point.
Yeah, the slow roller coaster part of it, because there are these
Yeah.
ups and downs, but they're part of life.
But
And it's the thing you talk about, that like we're not in crisis, things are on fire, but that's life. You know, that's kind of, you know,
That's the nature of our life.
Consumed by the fire.
we're not actually being consumed by the fire.
Yeah.
You know, the house
Yeah.
is on fire. You can have a seat. You know, we're just getting, getting something to drink. The house is on fire, but please,
Right.
you know, it's a
Right.
little bit of a, you know, it's a little bit of that.
One
Right.
that I've realized, we were talking about this recently, that I have to have multiple people that that I have talked about. I've used the word cancer with enough that they stop reacting to the word cancer. You know, that I've kind of chosen people here and there that if I need to talk about something that is incidental to the fact that my husband has cancer, it wouldn't be part of my life if there wasn't cancer, but I'm not talking about the cancer. I need people who are in enough on the story to not be overwhelmed by or not need a context for, you know, that we're in a hospital all day. And incidentally, they had this awesome lunch, you know. But I need them to be in different places, and I still have to be careful with how often I'm talking about these things with each of them, because it's too heavy for casual acquaintances.
But even your closer friends, you're a little bit sensitive to not kind of overwhelm
because I
particular
have
friendships.
I've definitely done this.
Particular friendships. Yeah.
Because it's you know, you know, my closest people are absolutely there when we're in crisis, and in the same way that when we were in this initial surgery and there was a problem to be solved and the team came together, our extended people came together and they were there for us. And if we're in crisis again, they will absolutely be there in a moment.
Yeah.
That marathon part, the just as much energy as we have to put into our own self-care,
Right.
to be able to have this heaviness in our.
You know, it's interesting, and you're so attuned to this, and there's so much more you could say about this, I'm sure, with more time. But I think even in my relating to the two of you in the past 24 hours, I get a taste of the challenge it would be for a friendship, because my wife went through something yesterday, and we went to an emergency room and we came out, and then I informed you of that in the course of getting ready for these conversations. And even as I did that, I had an awareness of, wait a minute, these guys have spent a large percentage of the last 6 years in the hospitals and going through things that are way more serious, way more threatening. And then it's sort of like, but on the other hand, your responses don't indicate that at all. Your responses were responses of, oh, well, maybe she could try this. I've been through that before. And oh, how sorry we are that she'd had to go through that. So, but I'm saying that you handle it very well, but I think it must have a certain way of reverberating in so many relationships where people aren't sure whether they can share with you what's happening in their own lives, right?
One thing I want to hit, I know we're getting short on time, is there have been times when Rebecca and I have connected with the cancer communities, including the families and spouses, that have been such powerful things for us. And it speaks to, you know, the different kinds of social supports in, you know, the family and the friends, but also the special place for people who have gone through the similar, you know, gone through the similar thing. When I was in radiation, and I was able to stay at an American Cancer Society Hope Lodge, free lodgings for people who are displaced from their home to have day after day radiation. And the Hope Lodges are set up for families to be kind of pushed together to be interacting, and they're marvelous. And do you want to say a word?
Yeah. Well, I expected this to be a pretty depressing place. Who wants to live in a building full of cancer patients?
Right.
How awful. And the reality was that you could have the dark humor and they got it. You know, you could say the word cancer and you didn't have to give the room a minute to recuperate.
Right.
They were already there.
You could share gory details. You can share gory details about what the surgery is, where the cancer is, what the course is. And this was like, it was like, you know, talking to sports fans, talking about how that game went, because they know all about it.
Well, because they know what it is to be in that game, or at least their version of that game. So it's a discussable topic. Hey, you know, we are getting right to the end of our time, and I want to say, a topic we didn't get to, I'm hoping to get to get together with the two of you and hang out and have further conversation, and not everything has to be on a podcast, but thank God.
Thankfully,
thank God. Is the whole, with the two of you sitting there, it makes it obvious, and it's sort of maybe a short-sighted of me to not jump in earlier with this question, but the question of how it's been to be with your children and going through this. It's such a tender time. When I imagine this in my own life, and what it, you know, it would be one of the most compelling and moving and important and sometimes saddening, challenging, and yet the way you guys cope with it, I can't imagine people coping too much better. And I'm sure there's been this openness with the children, and there's been open questions and open answers and open humor and open participation together. And so if you want to say one thing about that in the last minute,
I'll say one thing, which is that there are some programs that are taking root in hospitals to help parents with this. Rebecca and I did a consultation at Mass General. In general, our approach to our kids seems to be pretty consistent with the kinds of ways of talking to the kids and this and that. You know, so for us, it was kind of a validation. It was kind of a reassurance of, wow, it sounds like you're finding ways to talk to the kids with what they're ready for and make sure they have supports. But just to alert people listening that there are some programs out there specifically on helping with this.
Well, let me say in closing that I mean, my gratitude is very full about you, Seth, coming on for all these hours and being so open and in an unprecedented way in your professional life and personal life, and Rebecca, for you being willing to jump in and talk. And you're I'm going to go back and listen to things you've said because, you know, obviously they really represent deep positions you've taken and thoughts that you've had. I really appreciate it. It's just nice to see the two of you together. And I want to encourage people to give you, to reach out to you guys through your email, Seth, to ask questions or to give feedback or comments. I know how much those things mean. With I get feedback on these podcasts, and each person who writes says, "Oh, I'm sure you hear feedback all the time," and it's totally. First of all, it's not true, and second, it's totally irrelevant because each one is just very meaningful. So, if people want to write these guys, Rebecca and Seth, you can write to Seth.Axelrod, AXELROD, at Yale.edu, and I'm sure you can get through to Rebecca with the same thing. So thank you very much. I so appreciate it. I just think these things are going to be really valuable for a lot of people in the future listening. So
thanks very much, Charlie.
yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good evening. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay.
Bye.
Good
Bye.
night.